started, Brian. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. And as Doug mentioned, I am Brian Fuchs with the National Drought Mitigation Center at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and I'm going to be doing the overview today. So as we get into everything, we have some general information. Many people are coming together to collaborate to put this together. Our next webinar will be on October 15th with Laura Edwards, the South Dakota State climatologist, presenting along with Brad Rippey from USDA, who does his annual Ag Summary talk during this time. Information about these webinars are at the link provided. Also, past webinars can be found at 2 different locations with those 2 links. And this is being recorded, as Doug said, and the presentation will be made available for everyone as well. So here's our agenda for today, and there are some great pictures here that were shared to me or with me from Becky Bollinger in Colorado. Quite the month so far in Colorado with the fires taking place, and that you can see the ash falling on the vehicles there, and then snowfall. So a little bit of everything. So with the agenda, current conditions, the recent and past, near past conditions, regional impacts, general hydrological, some agricultural stuff. Going to get into the outlooks, mentioning some La Nina information as well. And then at the very end, we'll do questions. Please put those in the chat box and we will get to those at the very end. So current conditions. So we have the climatology for August that came out from NCEI, and you can see on the left-hand side the temperatures, and on the right-hand side the precipitation ranks. And what we can see for temperatures is throughout the region we had near average to above average temperatures. Some of the warmer areas were in the high plains region, and once we got out to Wyoming and Colorado, we had near record warmest, or in the case of Colorado, record warmest temperatures for August. And then the precipitation on the right, we definitely can see in the upper Midwest, we had near normal to above normal precipitation. As we went further south and west into the region, things did dry out. Nebraska had their driest August ever in 126 years of record keeping, and Wyoming and Colorado were not far behind, as well as Iowa. So again, quite the contrast from the northeast portions of the region to the southwest portions of the region, with quite the transition as we go through that area. And we look at the region for the summer as a whole. So this is the June, July, and August period. Throughout the contiguous United States, it was the 4th warmest summer on record ever. So that does say quite a bit as far as where temperatures have been. And what you can see on the left-hand graphic is a lot of orange through the region. Definitely seeing some well above normal temperatures for the summer as we go throughout all of the region. And then precipitation on the right-hand side, wetter conditions up along the Great Lakes in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. And then again, that same kind of transition as you go southwest out of the Great Lakes. Conditions were drier in Iowa, Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado, and near normal through the Dakotas and Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. So as we go into the near term, so this is the last 30 days, this is what we are seeing for temperature departures. And what we have noticed is since the middle of August, temperatures through a lot of the region have been well below normal, and Kansas really stands out at being, especially in the central portions of the state, 4 to 5 degrees below normal just over the last 30 days. And much of this did come over the last week or so, where we did see some fairly substantial departures. But as with everything, not all areas were the same, and we can definitely see in the eastern portions of the regions through Ohio and Indiana, temperatures were 2 to 3 degrees above normal, and then we have quite the mix as we get into the Dakotas and portions of Nebraska, and then when we finally get out to portions of Wyoming and Colorado, we see temperatures 3 to 4, maybe even 5 degrees above normal. So again, quite the contrast in temperatures, but in many areas we were seeing quite the cool down over the last 30 days. What does this mean for our soil moisture in the region? And definitely I highlighted 2 different areas in the red circles, and you can definitely see that the areas that have been the driest for the longest periods have shown the substantial decline in soil moisture during this time period. Some of those areas that stand out are definitely in portions of western Iowa, into portions of western Nebraska, almost all of Colorado, into Wyoming. And then there's that smaller area out in Indiana, southern Michigan, and Ohio that's kind of been lingering on, that even with some of the precipitation, they maybe did not get as much as some other areas, and soil moisture is still hurting. And one thing to make note of too, that even in some of the areas that did pick up some good rains last week, most of that moisture was held into the upper portions of the soils, and deeper soil moisture replenishment still needed, as that's still in short supply. And what's the evaporative demand been over the last 3 months? So basically, looking through the summer months, we can see that through especially the western areas of the region, using this EDDI product, which is the Evaporative Demand Drought Index, we see Colorado and Wyoming standing out in some fairly substantial evaporative demand going on over the summer months. But as you go through Nebraska and into portions of the Dakotas and Iowa, you can see that it wasn't unique just in that area. And then again, you go further east in the region into Ohio and Indiana and transition into New England, you can see that that evaporative demand, again, a lot of this is associated with above normal temperatures through the summer months, that evaporative demand was quite high.
And can you, Brian, can you explain just in a couple sentences, I know it's not easy, but what the EDDI, evaporative demand, actually means? So
basically what EDDI is looking at is the potential for moisture loss in the region. It doesn't take into account precipitation at all. So basically what it's doing is looking at several different inputs to measure what that loss of moisture would be through the water balance equation in those regions.
Thank you.
And we can also see this on the next slide with the vegetation response. And VegDry on the left shows the current map. And the areas that are in the browns and reds and oranges, those are areas where vegetation definitely has been stressed due to drought conditions through the summer months. And you see, again, western Iowa into eastern Nebraska and southeast South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, some of those areas are really standing out. And if we look at how that has changed over the last month, the areas that are in yellows and oranges are showing where that vegetation condition has declined, and that's pretty consistent through much of the north central region. We do see some green in there where there have been some improvements, but for the most part, the trend would be that over the last month, we've seen vegetation conditions continue to decline. So how does this relate to our precipitation? And when we look at departure from normal on the left and percent of normal on the right, first off, with the departures, you can see that all the areas in the yellows, oranges, and dark oranges are all below normal. So those are that. Giving it just a quick eye test, you can see that the majority of the region has been below normal for precipitation over the last 30 days. And we have some pockets that have been well below normal in portions of Nebraska and Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, even into Missouri and Kansas. But then we also see this bullseye of moisture that encompasses portions of northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin and eastern Iowa, where conditions, especially the majority of this has been over the last couple of weeks, have been fairly wet. And when we look at the percent of normals, again, those really stand out for those 30-day percentiles. And the areas in reds, you really see a lot of Nebraska, southern Illinois and Indiana, as well as North Dakota. Basically, it's either we're the haves and have-nots when it comes to precipitation over the last 30 days. When we go a little bit further out, This takes us through most of the summer and into the first part of September here. The summer was, again, mixed. The departure from normal on the left-hand side, again, focus on those yellows, oranges, and browns. You can see those areas that have been below normal for precipitation for the summer. We see areas in the northern portions of the region as well as the southern portions of the region that have a little bit different signal, more on the wet side. But some of these statistics can also be deceiving. There was some discussion out of Illinois noting that even though precipitation has been above normal in portions of the northern Illinois, that all of this came within about a 6 to 8 hour period on a very intense rainfall event that basically has skewed the data for the entire summer period. So when you look at some of these products, that's just a notation that you do need to pay attention on the nuances of how that precipitation came. And really, you look at the western portions of the region, well above normal through the summer months. And again, western Iowa into eastern Nebraska, there was that pocket of dryness where anywhere from 6 to 8 inches still below normal, even with the precipitation that came last week.
Hey, Brian. Yeah, I'm going to address a question, or you can. What time frame is used to compare the departure from normal and/or percent of normal? And that can be taken in two different ways. I don't know if you want to answer that or not, Brian.
So yeah, meaning what's the comparison? So that's going to be the most recent normals, which correct me if I'm wrong, they go through 2010 right now. So we're due for an update. Correct. Okay.
That's my
So
yeah.
Yes.
So it's based on the 30-year period of 1980 to 2010.
Yes.
That's where the normal comes from, if you will.
Yes, so these are not compared to long-term averages, but these are a comparison to the 30-year normal. That's a good question. The calendar year precipitation, departure from normal on the left and percent of normal on the right. And you can see that for the majority of the region, again, focus on those yellows and oranges, that a good majority of this area has been slightly below to well below normal for the calendar year. And a lot of this dryness even started prior to that. It was even into last fall. And when we look at some of these percent of normals, portions of Iowa and the Dakotas and Wyoming and Colorado really stand out, where most of these areas were below 70% of normal so far for the calendar year. And then you have other areas that really stand out, like in Missouri and Illinois and into Kentucky and in Ohio, where they're at 130 to 150% of normal for the calendar year right now. So again, some quite large discrepancies in areas that have and have not had precipitation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the drought portion of the talk later on. So just first off, some regional impacts, some nice pictures that were shared with me from folks in the region. And again, we've had a lot of interesting weather taking place in the region and a lot of different impacts, and that's what I'm going to try and hit on. So one of the biggest things that actually took place fairly recently, just last week, with the early freeze in North Dakota. And what we see is September 8th on the upper left and September 9th on the lower right. And this is the maximum and minimum air temperature for the day. And so the areas I circled, focus on the number on the right. That's going to be the low temperature. And we typically think of a killing frost at 28 degrees. And so up in North Dakota, you see a lot of mid to lower 20 values on the information from the 8th. And then on the 9th, you go into the southwest part of their state, and you see some of these mid to lower 20 values again. And really, we did see quite the widespread early freeze event, not just frost, but a freeze event in the North Dakota region that definitely is going to have some impact on agricultural concerns up there for crops that were not quite mature. And during the same time frame, we have shown here from September 7th through the 9th, all these markers are areas that set record low maximum temperatures for those particular dates. And some of these markers actually set records on all 3 of these dates, even though there's only one marker being shown for a location. I know here in Lincoln, 2 of the 3 days we set a record low maximum temperature for the date. But you can just see how widespread that cool air was, that it wasn't just focused on the freeze up in North Dakota, but that cold air transitioned all the way down and covered most of the region outside of those areas to the far east. So quite the burst of cold air reaching down and impacting the region last week.
And just to be clear, Brian, those blue markers are where the records were set. The gray ones were not, correct?
No, those are each. So the purple, gray, and blue is this one. The purple were the 7th. I think the gray were the 8th, and the blue were the 9th. So this is all 3 days shown on one map. But like I said, some of those locations, if they could have had all 3 markers, they would have all shown up. They just didn't stack them. So yes, this did impact agriculture. So there's a lot of information. This was prepared by USDA's World Ag Outlook Board and shared with us. And this is for corn. So this is based on the extreme temperatures that were shown. Those temperatures are given in the light blue values and show your major and minor corn areas. And then the numbers in yellow were the percent of corn dented. So you can see up in North Dakota, only about 52% of the corn was dented at this point in time when we did see some of these extreme temperatures taking place. A little bit better as far as the percent of corn dented as you go further south, but still some impact from that cold weather. The next one here is for soybeans. And you can see even in North Dakota, even fewer soybeans were dropping leaves or reaching that maturity level during this time frame. And you can again see those same temperatures up there. So here's our corn progress. Again, just quickly going to go through some of the ag concerns in the region. So right now, the September 13th information from USDA is the percent of dented corn, and you can see that a lot of areas are well ahead of normal outside of North Dakota. You can see that comparisons in South Dakota 14% ahead of where they typically would see corn dented for this time of year. And the trend across the region is corn basically had progressed quite well this year. We had enough heating units to really push that crop along, and we're seeing it mature a little quicker. And that's this slide here. Those areas in orange are definitely seeing more and more corn being mature, and you can see the second number in the brackets is how far ahead it is for this time of year, or the change from the 5-year average. And so quite a few areas are above where they should be, but also you're seeing the eastern corn belt not as bullish as far as that corn maturity, where we see Ohio, Illinois, Missouri a little bit behind, and even Kentucky. And we've even been able to see some corn harvested. Again, that number below in the brackets is showing the change from the 5-year average. And again, those areas in the western areas of the Corn Belt, definitely we're seeing that crop mature a little more quickly and seeing harvest taking place already. Same thing with soybeans. We can see the percent dropping leaves, again, a sign of maturity as that crop begins to dry down. For the most part, the region as a whole is seeing things ahead of schedule. North Dakota, Illinois, and Missouri are kind of the anomalies. And again, definitely up in North Dakota where we had the freeze, that's going to impact the future of that crop going forward. How much winter wheat has been planted as of September 13th. We can see we're quite a bit ahead in places like Colorado and South Dakota, but behind in Kansas and Nebraska. And again, one of the key features of that is a lot of producers are getting that seed in the ground, but moisture is going to be something that we're going to have as a concern, especially for those on double crop lands and also for those that want to utilize that wheat for grazing. Pasture and rangeland conditions actually improved quite a bit. So what we're seeing on that bracketed number below, that's actually the change from last week. So the negative numbers actually mean improvement from the week before. So looking at Nebraska, we had a 17% improvement in the amount of pasture and rangeland and poor to very poor compared to last week. So again, a little mixed throughout the region, but again, those areas that did pick up some rains last week did see some benefits from that, and pasture and range was one of them. On the contrast, you look at Wyoming and Colorado, the percent of poor to very poor rangeland is quite high, and that's been fairly consistent through the summer as the drought has hit those areas hardest, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Transition into the Missouri River Basin. So right now there's about 59 million acre feet of water stored in the system. You can see on the graphic on the right-hand side, the red line is where we currently are. The green line is where we were last year. 2011 is the black line. And what we're seeing is we're pretty much right in the middle of what would be considered average for the Missouri River Basin. We did see runoff drop off quite a bit here in the last month or so. Basically, I got some comments here from Kevin Grody and Kevin Lowe talking about what's been going on the basin. And I'm not going to read their comments, but they're going to be made available. But if you look at the current reservoir levels on the right-hand side, most areas are within a couple feet of being in their conservation pool. I think I'm saying that correctly. So they're still a little bit above flood control, but we're seeing that those levels drop and really getting into what conservation pool would be for those main stem reservoirs on the Missouri system. So definitely seeing the hydrological impact in the region on places like the Missouri with the dryness and warm conditions that we had seen definitely in August. So looking at the 28-day stream flow averages, again, anything that's in the green, the blues, or even the blacks, those are normal to above normal flows on these waterways. And so you can see the quick eye test, the majority of the region definitely is doing fine as far as those 28-day averages, but you do see some areas in Iowa and Nebraska, and then Colorado, almost the entire state, we're seeing much below normal, and even into Wyoming. So again, that contrast from east to west as far as how severe that dryness has been through the summer months is starting to show up in the hydrological systems as well. Looking at the Great Lakes, this is the time series for the lakes, and again, on the far right-hand side of these time series, you can see that most all lake levels are well above normal, the red lines being that long-term average. That I shouldn't interchange those words, normal and average, but that red line is the long-term average, and you can see most all of the lakes are well above that long-term average still, and have been for the last several years. So that's been quite consistent on the Great Lakes over the last few years. Looking at the outlook for water levels on the Great Lakes from the Army Corps of Engineers here. And when you look at each one of these individually, the trend has been that, again, you're going to look at some of these levels starting to drop a little bit. And again, if I go back to the slide, you can see that there are some seasonal fluctuations. So as you go forward here, this is looking forward all the way through the summer of 21, that the trend is to see some water levels declining, but then increasing again, fairly typical from what we would expect on the lakes for this time of year, and also what we would expect going forward too. So another picture from Colorado before we get into the drought update from Becky. This was the middle of the day out in Colorado, just the haze from the smoke and the particulate matter in the air. Many reports coming out of the region of just how bad the smoke and air quality was related to the fires that were taking place in Colorado. So the drought monitor that came out today, Brad Rippey was the author, again, going to be a speaker next month, definitely are seeing some color in our region. So the areas that are showing most significant drought are on the western edges in Wyoming and Colorado, kind of what I've hinted at. But we're also seeing drought almost in every state of in the region right now. So that's something that we need to keep our eye on, especially as we go forward. Looking at some of the statistics here for the country, currently we have just over 32% of the country in drought. A year ago, that number was only just under 14%. We also have over half of the country in abnormally dry or drought conditions, with about 65 million people are being impacted by drought in the U.S. right now. So what does this tell us? In the last year, we've almost tripled the amount of drought compared to where we were a year ago at this time. When we zoom into the region, we get a little bit better idea of where we're at. Just over 30% of the region in drought. 3 months ago, that number was at 17%, and a year ago, that number was at 3%. So what we're really seeing is the north central region as a whole has seen drought expand, not only in the last 3 months, but over the last 12 months. And since the start of the calendar year, we went from 5% to just over 30%. So drought has definitely been developing in the region, and we're going to get into this in the outlooks too. What should we be expecting as far as our drought conditions going forward? And I like to show this time series graphic. So at the top is the full drought monitor history for the north central region, and we can see that the last significant drought event was the 2012-2013 drought event that really stood out. So I wanted to zoom into that time frame from that last big drought event to present, which is on the bottom. And you can see there's a red line along that time series as well. I added that red line in to show the amount of drought that we have right now. And if you follow that red line to the left, we haven't had this much drought in the region since 2013. So that's pretty significant. We've went a pretty long period of time without having this much of the north central region in drought. As you can see on the bottom time series, we have had some ebb and flow with drought developing and going away, but we haven't reached this much drought in the region for quite some time. So it's something to pay attention to, that going forward, are we on an upswing like we saw in 2012, 2013, or are we going to see this diminish? That's the big question. So this is the 3-month change map for the U.S. Drought Monitor over the period from June 23rd through September 15th. And again, focus on those browns and oranges. That's showing those areas where we've had 2, 3, 4 class degradation over that 3-month period. In Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, Iowa, they really stand out. But we also see some areas of multiple class improvement during that same time frame, up in portions of North Dakota and Minnesota, as well as Kansas and southeast Colorado. So at the same time where Colorado has seen conditions decline in portions of the state, there has been some slight improvement in some areas that had some longer term drought in the southeast portions of the state, same as in southwest Kansas. So the last thing I'll get into here with the last few minutes I have for the discussion is the 7-day precip outlook, 8 to 14-day precip and temperature outlooks, the monthly outlook, the autumn outlook for September, October, November, the winter outlook, and the seasonal drought outlook. So over the next 7 days, this is the QPF from September 17th through the 24th. And what stands out is, for the most part, the entire region is going to be anticipating fairly dry conditions. Even those areas.
Yeah, Brian, what does QPF mean?
Quantitative precipitation forecast. I'm sorry, I should have spelled that out. And
yeah, and just kind of say what it means, what the whole map.
Yeah, basically this is all the different models that are being used from the Climate Prediction Center and NCEP. They are putting these models together to come up with indication of what precipitation could look like over the next 7-day period. And so if we look at
accumulation of precipitation,
yes, accumulation of precipitation for that 7-day period. And for the most part, the region is going to be not accumulating much of any precipitation. It looks like some of the upper elevations in Colorado and maybe western Wyoming, but for the most part, it is anticipated to be quite dry over the next week. As we get into the 8 to 14 day outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center, which is taking us for the period of September 24th through the 30th. The temperature outlook on the left and the precipitation outlook on the right. And what we're seeing is throughout the region for temperatures, higher than normal probability of above normal precipitation, above normal temperature during this time, with that bullseye really focused on the Dakotas and the upper Midwest. For precipitation during this time, we see the signal showing us above normal chances of below normal precipitation during this period, with a bullseye right on the middle Missouri River Basin Valley of Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. But the region as a whole is also showing above normal chances of below normal precipitation during this time frame. As we get into the monthly outlook for October, again, temperature on the left, precipitation on the right, we're seeing that the entire region is still showing a strong signal of above normal chances of above normal precipitation. That's twice now, above normal temperatures during this time frame. And most of the region is falling into that 40th percentile. And for precipitation, we see a little bit of a mixed signal for October. The southern portions of the region are definitely on that above normal chances of below normal precipitation, but we are seeing equal chances more in the north. So from the Great Lakes through the upper Midwest into the northern plains, there's equal probability of above or below normal chances for precipitation during this time. So we'll have to see how that sets up in October. And as we continue forward, the October, November, December outlooks, again, temperature on the left, precipitation on the right. I'll see if I can do this right. Again, the region as a whole is showing a pretty strong signal of above normal chances of above normal temperatures during this time frame, especially as you go further west in the Wyoming, Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas region, where we're at the 50% or even 60% chances. But again, the signal is strong throughout the entire region. And we see a little bit of a shift for the 3-month outlook for precipitation. So if you recall, for October, we were seeing that this signal was including portions of Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois. And as we go forward, we're starting to see that shift a little bit further south, a little bit more on the La Nina-ish type of signal, where the southern plains are definitely looking to be drier, with a signal of equal chances over most of the region, and maybe even some above normal probabilities of above normal precipitation reaching into portions of the northern Rockies into Wyoming. So with that being said, there has been quite a bit of talk that a La Nina advisory has been issued, and it has been upgraded to a chance of a moderate La Nina event. And we can see on the left-hand side, the red line is kind of the dynamic average of all the different models that are being looked at. And you can see that cooling is taking place through the fall and winter months. And we're at about a 75% probability of seeing La Nina develop on that right-hand graphic for the late fall into winter months as well. So what does a typical La Nina pattern mean? Well, it really means that those areas of the southern plains look to be dry and warm. We see a wetter signal on the eastern Corn Belt, as well as the Pacific Northwest, and we see cooler temperatures coming in to more of what would be the northern plains, northern Rockies type region. And one key with this La Nina, that this is what we typically would expect, but it really depends on where that jet stream is going to set up. And again, a lot of the central region is going to be on that transition zone, where if that storm pattern sets up, areas to the north are going to be more wet and cool, while areas to the south are going to be more dry and warm. And so we're really going to have to watch this La Nina development and see not only this is what we typically would expect, but then also does it behave as it should, and we see that jet stream set up where we would expect it to. So again, a lot to be looking forward to as we go forward. And this is that winter outlook for December, January, and February. Just to make note that the official outlook will come out on October 15th, and we'll be discussing that on the next month's webinar. But looking at temperatures again on the left and precipitation on the right, we see that for our region, that for the most part, for temperatures, we're seeing equal chances through a lot of the region, and even in the north, we're seeing below normal chances of above normal temperatures, or excuse me, above normal chances of below normal temperatures through the Dakotas and portions of Wyoming, Minnesota, and Montana. And then on the southern edge, again, we're seeing above normal chances of above normal temperatures through portions of Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, and the southern reaches of Missouri, Illinois, and that. So again, it's really showing a strong La Nina signal for this outlook. And the precipitation outlook on the right is quite similar as well, where we're seeing that wetter signal, especially over the eastern Corn Belt, northern plains, and northern Rockies, with above normal chances of above normal precipitation, a little strip of equal chances in there as well. And then to the south of that is where we're seeing the above normal chances of below normal precipitation. So this is really a La Nina signal on these outlooks, and we're going to have to really watch again, like I said, where that storm track sets up and where that jet stream sets up, as you'll see that really determine where that transition between the north and south, wet and dry zones, and warm and colder zones will take place. So the seasonal drought outlook, so this is taking us all the way through the end of the year. So on this product here, the thing to focus on is the brown. That's where drought currently is, and it's going to persist. And then yellow is where drought development is likely. And we're seeing a lot of yellow on this map, especially in the southern plains, the southwestern U.S. So what this is showing is the models are pretty bullish with this La Nina signal of drying out to our south in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and even into the lower Mississippi River Valley. And we're going to see drought pretty much continuing through the winter months and expanding from what we're seeing right now. Maybe those northern areas of northern Wyoming into Montana and that have the opportunity to see some drought improve, and maybe even some removal if this La Nina pattern sets up the way it typically should. With this in mind, we also have some significant wildland fire potential. This is coming from the NIFC Predictive Services. And again, those areas in red are well above normal for fire potential in both October and November. And that does impact portions of our region in Kansas and Colorado. The one for September was pretty bullish on the fire potential in Colorado. I didn't show that one, but Colorado was lit up red for September, and that did pretty much come to fruition so far as well. A lot of different information. Again, some of these links that were shared earlier, again, they're going to be shared in the PowerPoint and the recording, so I'm not going to go through all of them. Again, a lot of people are coming together to help put this on, and just want to thank them for their contributions. My contact information, probably best to reach me by email, as I'm still working from home these days. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Brian. Can you go back to your December, January, February slide, please?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. I leave that up there because there were questions around La Nina and what it meant and all that other business. A couple things I want to just point out, or we can point out, is that when you see the lightest shading of color on these, so that light blue or that light tan color, those show that there's a leaning towards either cooler or warmer on the left map. But that's a relatively weak confidence in that forecast. As you go towards higher and higher probabilities, in other words, 40 and 50, those are stronger. Okay, so same with precipitation. In precipitation, generally those probabilities are less because we're just not as certain for those things. But this, as Brian said, very stereotypical forecast for La Nina. We call it signature or pattern across the United States for our winter. So hope that helped at all. I do have Kevin Lau, are you still on the call? Or yeah, let me just check and see if you've gotten off. So I had a question, and Kevin, I don't know, I can unmute you here. Yep, I just did it. Anyway, there's a question that I'm going to get to you, and then because I know you work for NOAA and all that business. So the question was, do you have any products that give probabilities for various river stages on the lower Mississippi? And maybe you can just say, I have the person who asked the question. We can always email him later with more information. But lower Mississippi, longer term, 30, 60, 90-day river stages. Is that something we have?
Yes, it is. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So
yeah,
Kevin,
yeah,
and others might be interested in that, but go ahead and explain that just very simply, and because I'm sure there's a concern about drought or something like that, and we want to answer that as best we can. But
sure.
Maybe later I can send you his email, and you can have a better chat with him about that.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah, so actually that would be handled. The nation is divided up into 13 river forecast centers. The river forecast center that I'm with is the Missouri Basin, so we do all the rivers within the Missouri Basin. On the Mississippi, it's divided at Chester, Illinois. The upper part is handled by our office in Minneapolis, and the lower part is handled by our office in Slidell, Louisiana. But all of us produce at least once a month, we will produce a 90-day, 3-month outlook, probabilistic outlook that will give you the chances of a river exceeding or going below a certain value. And so, and that's based on historic precipitation patterns and historic temperature patterns. And we run that through the same model that we use to do our daily forecast, but we actually put through that model, the last 40 or 50 years of precip and the last 40 or 50 years of temperatures, and we generate that 90-day outlook. But if Douglas puts us in contact with each other, I can talk to you a little bit more, and then I can also put you in contact with the respective Mississippi office that could actually give you Mississippi River information.
Yep. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Kevin. That was helpful. All right. We have quite a few questions and comments here. Brian, can you go back to the soil moisture anomaly map? Someone wanted to know what basically what the colors meant on the soil moisture anomalies.
Yeah, so this is a map that's showing percentiles. So basically, the total column soil moisture availability has been broken into percentiles, and these percentiles correspond to the same ones used in the Drought Monitor makeup. So you can see that basically the amount of soil moisture right now in a percentile based on the historical average.
Okay, and then someone asked about copies of these slides, and yeah, we always put them all in the same place in a PDF form. Hopefully you saw the answer that I sent to everybody in terms of the 2 locations that you'll get these in the next 48 hours or so. We'll put them up on the web as well as a recording of this. You can get all that stuff at one of these two locations. They're both at the regional climate centers, Midwest and High Plains. We already answered that question. We talked a little bit about impact of La Nina. Oh, thanks, Brian. We talked a little bit about impact of La Nina on the United States, and we could go on about this, but I'm going to try and sum it up. And Brian, I guess go back to that final December, January, February slide one more time. This is it. Generally, near normal to below normal temperatures are more common during this period, the winter period in the northern, let's say, tier or two tiers of states, and generally warmer than normal conditions are felt across the southern tier or couple tiers of states. I'm being very broad brush about this. In terms of precipitation, same sort of pattern in terms of wetness to the north and dryness to the south. You saw the drought outlook until the end of the year. La Ninas are also known to be quite variable in what they do, a little more so than El Ninos. They're the brother of La Nina. So we're not doing El Nino, we're doing La Nina, but there's a lot of variability in the outcome of La Ninas that we see. So a lot of people equate things to these, and they don't always hold true. We've had extreme wet, we've had extreme dry during La Nina. So I'm not saying all that is. I'll say that this is the most probable outcome, but it's also not locked in for sure. Okay.
And the stronger the La Nina ends up being, the better chance for it to look like this. If it's a weaker La Nina, there's opportunities for other things to influence it to not look like this.
Dennis, since you're speaking, I'm going to pick on you. Is it fair to describe, this is going back to drought, the western Iowa, eastern Nebraska dryness as a flash drought this year?
I wanted to punt that one to Brian to let him assess that one.
Okay, yeah, Brian.
I actually had someone in the media ask me that last week, and I said no. I said that the dryness, if you go back and look at the statistics, it really started last fall. We had a fairly dry fall into winter, into spring, into summer, and so that really negates that flashiness that we would think if conditions were fine and we went into substantial drought in a short period of time. So with that aspect, I would say no. Now, were there pockets that did have more of a flash drought attribute in Iowa and Nebraska and maybe even other areas this summer? Yes, especially during the month of August, we saw conditions quite warm and quite dry in many locations, and definitely they were becoming more flashy at that point in time. But western Iowa, eastern Nebraska, I looked into those numbers, and really that dryness started last fall.
Yeah, eastern Iowa, I would definitely call it a flashy one because they were doing pretty well until, say, mid-July. Yeah.
Okay. And I'll just say, there's always debate about what is a flash drought. It's not a hard and fast rule by any means. What is the concern level right now in terms of having a dry start to spring, let's say in the plains and western Midwest?
Looking at here's the drought outlook again, and that's taking us through the end of December of 2020, so the end of the year. And when you're seeing these areas that are already in drought persisting and drought continuing to develop to the south of us, I would say the likelihood of us talking about drought in the spring next year is quite high. For one thing, the winter months are typically our driest climatologically through all of the region. Secondly, when we see drought to the south, That's with the moisture source region being the Gulf of Mexico for many portions of Kansas and Nebraska and Missouri and even into Iowa. If it's dry to the south of us, those air masses definitely lose a lot of potential moisture from them as that moisture transports further to the north. And we've seen it in the past where drought in the southern plains really helps to develop drought in the central plains and Midwest. So again, looking at, I'm going to pull up my time series. And I don't know, Dennis, if you have something more to add, but we've went quite a while. We've went quite a long time drought-wise speaking since we've seen a longer term widespread drought in the region. And does that mean that we're due? It's hard to say that we're not, because we typically, the last 20 years, you can kind of see these droughts in the region every 5, 6, 7 years, and we've kind of went past that already. So that's my take.
Yeah, and the focus I take is, okay, what's your soil moisture situation like? What's your recovery been like in the fall? The eastern part of Iowa and on east picked up a lot of precipitation out of this last event and really took care of most of the issues in that area. Western Iowa, Brian touched on this, that we got a couple inches, which was good, but you've got a huge profile you have to fill yet, and we've got a ways to go before that happens. We have a good chunk of the fall that we can still get a chance for precipitation, but what we're seeing right now is not being optimistic towards improving that situation. Yeah, the soil moisture situation here, there's a couple different flavors of soil moisture models you want to look at, but we improved the situation in western Iowa, eastern Nebraska, but, well, not in eastern Nebraska. They missed out on much of that rainfall. But we have a ways to go yet before we feel comfortable about refilling the profile.
Say a little bit about the recharge time of year. That might also be helpful to talk about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead.
I'll take it. So what we really look at is, for producers right now, we can safely say if we haven't approached, we're approaching the end of the growing season as far as moisture needed for crops. And so many producers would like to see drier conditions for not only harvest, but also for grain dry down going forward. But that doesn't help recharge for next year, which is going to be a key component. So what we do is we typically look at any of these regions and what kind of moisture we receive up until the point that the soil freezes. And at that point, that will give us a pretty good idea of what's locked in and what's going to be available as we go into the spring of 2021 planting season.
Okay, moving along. So there's question. I think you mentioned where the winter jet stream sets up and when that happens and where that happens and all that business. And of course, that's a pretty good big crapshoot in terms of odds and all that stuff. All we can really say is that this winter, based on the La Nina signature again, is likely to be like other winters where we have several cold air outbreaks. The jet stream will sag. We'll have cool, like we said earlier, like a sort of coolish air to the north, cold air to the north, and warmer than normal. Doesn't mean that we won't have warm air, if you will, outbreaks to the north too. It just means it's more probable that we'll see more cold air injections, if you will, to the center. I always wait until after October to start getting much of a feel for a pattern shift, and this is subjective to some degree, but it's based on experience and what I've seen and heard. Sometime in November, we start getting an inkling for how things may evolve or continue to evolve for at least, I don't know, December, January, before the pattern shifts again in some major way. I don't know, Dennis or Brian, do you have any opinions about that in terms of jet stream and sort of persistence is really what we're talking about here.
I think. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I would agree that as we go through the transition season, which the fall transition season, we can't say too much by just looking at patterns until we get to start into that November and start seeing where things set up. So Doug, I would agree with Doug on that one.
Same here.
Okay. I hope that answers the jet stream questions a couple people had. Are there models and tools to forecast La Nina jet stream pattern? Yes, we use them all the time. And there's a European model, there's a US, there are several US models, there's ensembles of all of those. The models that make up these are dynamical and statistical, and that's why you see this, if you will, all these lines going across on the left. Those are all different models or different types of output from all around the world, trying to figure out what's going on with La Nina. There's consensus in there. There's a few other lines in there, but generally it's all pointing to a weak to moderate La Nina at this point. How widespread was the frost damage to the region on the 10th? Was more widespread than the August 10th derecho event? Yes, I'll answer that. Yes. How impactful was the dryness in the region for crop development during the next year's growing season? We've talked about that already to some degree. So frost damage was pretty broad. You saw that, the image that Brian showed in terms of all the cold dots all over the region as a whole. Those aren't all freezing, but those are record lows. And then he showed some up in North Dakota, and there were other places too, in Minnesota and western South Dakota, Colorado, and such, that froze as well. So it was pretty widespread, higher elevation and north, or higher elevations.
The bigger impact of the bigger impact of the freeze was probably non-row crops, gardens and people who are doing specialty crops with a little bit of an early freeze from that standpoint. Still determining some of the damage on the corn and soybeans in North Dakota because they were running so late this year, which carried back to last year.
And some of the assessments for those things do take a while, or do take until months sometimes in some cases to know what the actual damage was. Will the amount of rain received in southeastern U.S. from Sally or any subsequent systems have any short or long-term impacts on weather patterns and moisture in the north central part of the U.S.? Probably not from Sally. Sure, over a period of time, if it stays wet down there, as Brian said, that could help a little bit with advection of moisture or movement of moisture into our area. Not a major factor. The Gulf overwhelms what happens on the land for the most part, especially in the cool season. Thank you. Let's see. Yes, I know we're getting to the end here. Shoot a 30-year average. Okay. Other comments in here. Severe weather seems to be more prevalent this year with the derecho named in tropical storms. Do you expect that pattern to continue? Wow. So when we say severe weather, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. The derecho is an oddity, as we know, and it's an extreme event. Yeah, they do happen, 1 or 2 a year. Probably not in the same spot, but or same areas, but this year, golly, I don't have my stats in front of me. I wish someone from the Weather Service were on here could comment in terms of the amount in the north central part of the U.S. and how normal our severe weather season was. Earlier in the year, it was pretty mundane. Yeah, we do have these big systems like the derecho, or big events like the derecho that happens that seems to overwhelm everything else. But overall, in terms of tornadoes and hail and high winds and such, I really don't have a strong feel for how that was. We can probably get back to you on that. And you do also yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the Storm Prediction Center, which is also part of NOAA, collects that data, and they do print out climatologies or how much each year compared to other years. So if you go to Storm Prediction Center climatology, you can find it out there.
Thank you. And then your other part of your question is turning tropical storms. Yes, this is going to be a big year. It has been a big year. It's been a record year. If you Google NHC and find the National Hurricane Center, you can go look at their map for the Atlantic, and you'll see a bunch of X's and circles and lots of stuff going on in the Atlantic Ocean right now. So it's an exciting, maybe not in a good way, but it's an exciting fall to watch those hurricanes and tropical systems spin up. And part of that is a La Nina signature, by the way. I'll leave that at that. Oh my gosh, someone's asking about planting and growing season in Brazil. I don't think we can go there today. Don't know. Dennis, anything you want to say?
Quick one is that La Nina down there tends to dry, a chunk of the area tends to be drier with La Nina conditions.
I can also add that there is a drought monitor map for Northeast Brazil that's patterned off of the methodology we used here in the US that I help set up down there. If whoever asked the question, if they want to shoot me an email, I can share the link to the Northeast Brazil drought monitor. And they have a lot of information about that as well.
Thank you. We can do that. We'll make sure we'll try and do that. We're going to go a little late today because the questions are lots, so we'll do our best unless someone has to leave. What phase are we in terms of the PDO and relation to enhancing or diminishing the La Nina? This is a chicken and egg thing, and it's a tough one. Dennis, feel free, or Brian, but PDO relies on the ENSO and probably vice versa. I don't have a good answer for that. Anybody?
I didn't even look at any PDO myself, so I can't even answer.
Trying to look it up right now.
Okay, fine. Okay, some suggestions on how we can do things better. Let's see. And thank you for that. We will try to accommodate that. So would you recommend burning or delaying burning pastures in Kansas? Wow. This fall, spring. Boy, that is, would I recommend? I don't think I'd recommend. I think what we would do is say, here are the conditions that we foresee, and people who have a lot more knowledge about how things burn and wind and all that kind of stuff should probably make those decisions rather than us making recommendations. That's what I would say. I think all of the presentation material that we've shown points to, but not strongly, drier than normal conditions through the winter, certainly in the near term, and into the winter in terms of Kansas, in terms of drying. Anyway, I think that's all we can say about that. Is La Nina expected to linger in the spring? Yes, but that's normally when it dies off also. And so we will, obviously, yeah, you can see Brian showing you the bar graph there. It fades. I mean, typically this is normal. This is what it does. The models are all going to say that right now. So that's what we'll say too. Thanks for the comment about horticultural plant damage. Okay. Yes, we are posting these, Nick. Golly, we put it in. I will, oh boy. Yeah, go to that. Thank you. Look at this slide here, the very top there. Actually, the top one isn't correct. We have to fix that. The bottom link there to the MRCC is where you can go to get the webinars as well, the recordings and the PDF files of these things. And then, okay, I'm not sure what Mato Grosso is. Dennis, this is a comment from Bryce. Average starting date for Mato Grosso wet season is September. Oh, this is Brazil. Okay.
Yeah, it's Brazil.
Measured over the past 30 years. Okay. It's September 26th.
Doug, I got your PDO answer now too.
Okay, PDO.
We are in the negative phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which is a longer-term oscillation in the Pacific, the Northern Pacific. There is one paper that connected this phase more strongly to La Ninas, that these two kind of fit together. Again, it's one paper. other things to play in, but there's something maybe to watch a little bit.
Brian, can you back up one slide?
Yes.
Oh, you don't have our emails in there. There used to be our emails are all in there. I'd say for all the other questions and comments you guys had, write to me and I'll distribute them appropriately. We've sort of come to the end here. It's doug.cluck@noaa.gov. I can hopefully you can find that, or write to Brian or write to Dennis, any of those people, and we'll get the information to you accordingly. Thank you all very much. I'm going to end this webinar saying thank you to Brian and Dennis for being on the call and helping me answer the questions. There were a lot. I appreciate all that. We appreciate all the attention and questions. That's good. That's what these are for. Anyway, thanks, and see you in October, where we have Laura Edwards, a state climatologist from South Dakota, and Brad Rippey from the USDA Chief Economist Office, giving us a rundown of agriculture for 2020, as well as the usual summary that we just saw here. So thank you all. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.